Okay, new morning, new start. Give you a look at what I did yesterday, and at the moment I'm just really struggling with concepts of how I'm going to do the seating. So I did start out in SketchUp, and I will try and get a video out with the initial design that we've done on the cupboards and the kitchen and the units. This bit back here I'm trying to kind of work my way through, because until you see it in person and you start thinking about the cushion sizes and the mattress and how things are going to work, it's quite hard to guess and design on paper or on a screen. So in essence we've got these long-term bits which are 300mm or 350mm deep. They're fixed in place, but that still leaves us with this 1200mm, 4 foot wide load space. It's bigger than a pallet, a full-size pallet. So if we ever want to use the van for more practical stuff, for the house, for the renovation, DIY things, we've got this big load space. But when we want to go away in the van, or if the van's just parked up, we will leave in the 2 camping pods. Okay, so I guess it's on with the show. Over the past few videos I've had all sorts of comments moaning from too much talking, not enough doing, to all doing and no explanation. So I can't really win, but here's an attempt at just plenty of footage with a bit of a voiceover to explain what's going on. So first up was the slat making. I've got slats to make for the fixed sections, and then it was on to making the camping pods. So I had intended to do all of this with 12mm ply, but in the end I got to a point where I just had endless amounts of offcuts, and it was simply a case of using what I had. This is 18mm pine boards left over from a deconstructed wooden shelving unit. So I've taken that apart and cut them down to size, and I've gone slightly bigger spacings than I would have with 12mm, and we've got a nice thick mattress, so that's going to be fine. I then use pocket holes on the underside just to fix them together and keep everything square. They will not be load bearing, those screws. The slats themselves will sit on the supports. So then it was a quick check for size. I had 2 of these to make, and they were ever so slightly different. They needed a little bit of trimming up just to make sure that they didn't catch on the side supports. And then it was on to making the pods themselves. So I won't try and explain the design or the methodology really for these camping pods, because they went through several revisions as I was making them. But essentially it was just a ply box with a raised base that would contain drawer units and also the hinged bed slats on the top. And once again I was trying to use leftover ply, all the offcuts from around the van, and I did that to a certain extent, but did end up going and getting some more 12mm for the sides, just simply because anything thinner was just not holding square, and anything thicker would have just been too heavy. So this is the point where I got back and realised that the whole design was far too tall, and when you sat down your feet barely touched the floor, and whilst that's great for storage, it's no good for sitting down. So all of the structure came out, even the fixed units, and I had to cut all of those down. I then had to kind of rejig and engineer it so I could reuse the timbers and fix them back together. That only dropped it by about 75mm, but it was down to the height of the wheel arches, and that's as low as I could go, and it still left us with plenty of storage space. So nothing fancy about the construction here at all, just glues and screws. I did attempt to use the little brad gun that I've got, but it packed up mid-journey. So I've actually got a cordless one on order, but I needed to get on with it. So I've just done glues and screws, which is going to be even stronger, and the whole thing went together well. Of course, these are still going to end up that little bit too tall, so I'm going to make the boxes complete as one was already made, and then I'm going to cut them down afterwards. So like with any box that you're cutting on the table saw, I need to remove that riving knife so I could cut through, and then that would allow me to cut to the same height on both sides. The workshop ceiling is not quite tall enough to have them on end, and it's probably not as safe, so I ended up doing that with the circular saw. The whole thing worked out fine though, and they were then at the correct height. So with everything at the correct height, it's then on to making it somewhat stronger, bearing in mind I'm using only 12 and 9mm ply, and it has the tendency to get a little bit curvy. So I strengthened it up a bit with some inserts, and then it was on to cutting the surrounding framework for the bed slats. So I carried on and got those made up, and then it was time to start getting them prepped for painting, staining, varnishing. I hadn't really decided at this point. All I knew is that I wanted to take off that old stain that was on there. I had intended to paint them, but it was just worth getting them all sanded back anyway. So we're on to the next day now, and it's time to get the openings cut, which is where the drawers are going to come out. So I originally made up some face frames for either end, and from those I then drew a line which would mark the opening, and then cut that out. And then over the top of it I fixed the poplar face frame which I'd made, and that would kind of tidy up the ends, ready for painting. There will be matching doors that will be inserted into this, and then they'll be on full extension drawer slides. To carry on the sort of shaker style face frame look, I used the table saw to resaw some of the poplar down to 12mm, and I then used that on the front long edges of the boxes just to give it more of a framed look, and to cover up the random bits of plywood that was sat around. Then we're on to the tedious task of sanding and prepping these for paint. I decided to use a roundover bit in the router on all of the edges, and that would give a much softer feel to it and match the rest of the van. But also on the unseen parts underneath, especially on the rough plywood, once that had been sanded and routed, it was much smoother, so when it's being slid in and out of the van, it's never going to catch the floor, tear, rip or scratch what we've got down. Got a heavy duty vinyl anyway, but just to minimise any risk, it was worth doing. After a few test fits, it became apparent that there was a few tweaks to make, and we've gone beyond the use of power tools here, so it was back to the trusty plane just to smooth out some of the corners, just where things weren't square, and then I could get the whole lot put back together. And you'll see why, because when it fits into the van, it actually slides and butts up to the existing fixed panels, and I wanted that to be a fairly seamless join. Then it's the start of the painting marathon. Bunk beds had to come out. If you haven't seen that, I'll stick that video at the end. They went down really well and have been a great success. So I just rolled those up to get them out of the way, and then it was time to start prepping these boxes, sanding, priming, painting, and getting them ready to get the slats fitted. So I've gone purely an acrylic based system here, just used my normal acrylic primer undercoat, and although that isn't needed for the Zinza product I was using as the top coat, I did do that. It was just going to save on paint and I already had it. That went on pretty well. Of course it's drying super quick in this weather, and at this point I'm kind of wishing I'd just set up the sprayer. I didn't want to use the sprayer because of the overspray, and it was playing up a bit the last time I used it. So I ended up using a roller for the first couple of coats and then switching to a brushed finish for the top coat. So I took the opportunity to clear out the back of the van and prep up, and I painted all of the new fixed parts and a little bit of touch-ups on the panelling. And stupidly I switched brands, and the eggshell that I've used here is far more of a matte finish than the Leyland, so which I'm not particularly happy about. It's going to mark easier, so I'm actually going to go back in the next day or two and repaint the whole back of the van so everything's matching. So time to get all these hinged up. If you haven't used one of these hinge drilling self-centered bits, then you need to find some of those. I will stick a link down in the description, but they are a definite stocking filler for any DIY, and couldn't be without them now. So I'm just temporarily fixing in some piano hinges. I need to sort out some smaller screws. And you can see here how the camping pods slot in, and that little face frame kind of butts up and tidies in. It looks pretty smart. There's going to be a little bit of tweaking to do on these slats. You can see the left hand side there is not quite closing down, so that one needs to be trimmed. To excuse the audio, the mic battery's just run out, so I'm using the onboard mic. I've done most of this just as a voiceover, but I thought I'd give you a bit of a lowdown on how things have worked out. I still need to trim back these. Now, when I built all these, I assumed everything was square, but obviously being a van, nothing's square, and these walls actually kind of taper back in at the back, which I hadn't realised until now. So that means that I haven't bothered to scribe that back hinge plate which was already on there, which means that it effectively bows out the front of these ones. So I'm going to take those off, trim the front back on the table saw, and then hopefully those will fit. All of this is going to be hidden, so I'm not too worried, but it would be nice to get it all perfect. Permanent storage sections at the far edges, they're going to be just kind of the water and backup water and things like that. And then these are the camping pods. Now I haven't got the full extension drawer runners yet, but I have got basically a 900, nearly a metre long drawer that comes out this side, a shoe cubby here which is going to be a waterproof lined drawer, and that will be kind of for muddy shoes and stuff. So that's going to come out here. That's only a 35-40 mil, 400 mil deep. On this side there's going to be our clothes sort of wardrobe drawer. That again is quite a full length drawer, maybe I think that's an 800 mil one, or maybe that's the 900, and that's going to pull out into the van with all of like a section per person for clothes. And then also, because this divider has to be quite deep and the drawer is not the full depth of the camping pod, there'll be another compartment running alongside that drawer, which you can get to in here. So you know, anything like kites or I don't know what's long, windbreak or something might fit in there. And then on this side, because the kitchen is so deep, I've just put a little false face frame there. There's another compartment in here which is 400 deep, and that is going to be, I don't know, maybe bedding or long-term storage for food. So really, apart from this section, everything can be got to without having to disrupt the bed. So we've got clothes in here, boots and shoes that end, and then our main storage in here. So for the time being, the water's going to live in here. I kind of wish I'd thought this through a bit more, because you'd have to shift the cushion to get to this section. It's not the end of the world, but I will probably put a cubby in here, so you'll be able to get one of these out at a time through a storage, or even leave them in place and fill up through a door there, which will be easily accessed from the back here. Wheel arches are simply massive, a real pain, but I'm kind of working around them. I boxed them out and insulated in there, so you could get away with them, making them a bit smaller. But I left this little alley down here to run our pipes through and power to the back and anything like that we need to. So that'll run through, and then the kitchen is the other side of the wall. So I'd had just about enough of painting, so these I just sanded back, threw a bit of lacquer spray on there, so they're clean and simple, but they're never going to be visible. They were made up of a load of used furniture, board or used furniture that I cut up, and some poplar, and you know, they're fine. I'm not too fussed about them. So that's it. That's the camping pods done. I need to do the drawers, but I'm going to do that in a week or so. I'd rather get on and do the kitchen, because we can still go away and use it as it is now. I guess next job is going to be to get this mattress cut up. I've got a mattress. This is a full-size double bed, but it needs cutting up into the 3 sections. Finally, after lots of figuring out, I've managed to get it an even 360 all the way down here. There'll be the insert, and it won't be a table, so the table won't have to be taken down every night, and it's not a fancy pull-out or anything like that. It's really simple, but it's going to work, I hope. One last thing I didn't mention is both of these will be secured using bolts and T-nuts into the carcass of the van, so they're not going to go anywhere during transit. So that's it. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. And remember, if you haven't subscribed, we've got a handful of videos coming out in the next week or so, so please subscribe, click that bell symbol for a regular update. But that's it. Remember, if you can, do it yourself, and we'll see you next time.